Section 0 of The Psychology of Peoples, Its Influence on Their Evolution, by Gustave Le Bon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Oxenhandler. Introduction. Modern ideas on social equality and the psychological basis of history. Origin and development of the idea of equality. The consequences it has had. The price already paid for its application. Its influence at the present day on the masses. The problems examined in the present work. An inquiry into the principal factors of the general evolution of peoples. Is this evolution determined by institutions? The elements of each civilization, institutions, arts, creeds, etc., and whether they have not certain psychological foundations peculiar to each people. The element of chance in history and its permanent laws. The civilization of a people is based on a small number of fundamental ideas which determine its institutions, its literature, and its arts. These ideas come very slowly into being, and they are also very slow to disappear. Long after their erroneous nature has become clear to cultivated minds, they remain indisputable truths for the masses, and continue to exert their influence on the rank and file of the nation. It is difficult to obtain recognition of a new idea, but it is no less difficult to discredit an idea that has long been generally accepted. Humanity has always been exceedingly loath to abandon its decayed ideas and its moribund gods. It is barely a century and a half ago that certain philosophers, who, it should be remarked, were very ignorant of the primitive history of man, of the variations of his mental constitution, and of the laws of heredity, propounded the idea of the equality of individuals and races. This idea, which would naturally be most attractive to the masses, ended by firmly implanting itself in their mind, and speedily bore fruit. It has shaken the foundation of the old societies, given birth to the most formidable of revolutions, and thrown the Western world into a series of convulsions, the end of which it is impossible to foresee. Doubtless certain of the inequalities among individuals and races were too apparent to be seriously disputed, but people found it easy to persuade themselves that these inequalities were merely the outcome of differences of education, that all men are born equally intelligent and good, and that the sole responsibility of their perversion lies with the institutions they live under. This being the case, the remedy was simple in the extreme. All that had to be done was to reform the institutions and to give every man an identical education. It is in this way that institutions and education have ended by becoming the great panaceas of modern democrats, the means of remedying inequalities which clash with the immortal principles that are the only divinities that survive today. And yet science, as it has progressed, has proved the vanity of the theories of equality, and shown that the mental gulf created by the past between individuals and races can only be filled up by the slowly accumulating action of heredity. Modern psychology, together with the stern lessons of experience, has demonstrated that the institutions and the education which suit some individuals and some races are most harmful to others. But when ideas are once in circulation, it is not in the power of philosophers to destroy them when they arrive at the conviction that they are erroneous. Like a swollen stream that has overflown its banks, the idea continues its destructive progress, with which nothing can interfere. There is no psychologist, no traveller, no fairly intelligent statesman who is not aware how erroneous is this chimerical notion of the equality of men, which has thrown the world into confusion, brought about in Europe a gigantic revolution, involved America in the sanguinary war of succession, and landed all the French colonies in a state of lamentable decadence. Yet in spite of this knowledge, they are few indeed who venture to combat this notion. Moreover, the idea of equality, far from being on the decline, continues to make headway. It is in the name of this idea that socialism, which seems destined to enslave before long the majority of Western peoples, pretends to ensure their welfare. It is in its name that the modern woman, forgetting the deep-lying mental differences that separate her from man, claims the same rights and the same education as man, and will end, if she be triumphant, in making of the European a nomad without a home or a family. The masses scarcely trouble themselves about the political and social upheavals to which these levelling principles have given rise, or about the far graver events they have yet to bring forth, and the statesmen of the present day are in power too short a time for them to be more heedful. Moreover, public opinion has become the sovereign authority, and it would be impossible not to bow to it. The only real measure of the social importance of an idea is the influence it exerts on men's minds. The degree of truth or error it contains is only of interest from a philosophic point of view. When an idea has come to be a sentiment with the masses, all the consequences it involves must be undergone in succession. We see then that it is by means of education and institutions that the modern dream of equality endeavours to seek realization. It is in their name that, reforming the unjust laws of nature, we attempt to cast in the same mould the intelligences of the Negroes, of the Martinique, of the Guadeloupe, and of the Senegal, those of the Arabs of Algeria, and finally those of the Asiatics. The chimera is doubtless quite unrealizable, but experience alone can show the danger of chimeras. Reason is incapable of transforming men's convictions. The object of this work is to describe the psychological characteristics which constitute the soul of races, and to show how the history of a people and its civilization are determined by these characteristics. Neglecting details or only considering them so far as they are indispensable to the proof of the principles advanced, we shall examine the formation and mental constitution of the historic races, that is, of the races artificially formed in historic times by the chances of conquest, immigration, and political changes, and we shall endeavour to demonstrate that their history is determined by their mental constitution. We shall note the degree of fixity or variability of the characteristics of races. We shall try to find out whether individuals and peoples tend towards equality or, on the contrary, towards greater and greater differentiation. We shall then examine whether the elements composing a civilization, its arts, its institutions, its beliefs, are not direct manifestations of the soul of races, and whether in consequence it is not impossible that they should pass from one people to another. We shall conclude by attempting to determine what are the necessities under the influence of which civilizations decay and die out. We have dealt at length with the problems in question in various works on the civilization of the East. This short volume should be regarded as a brief synthesis. The point that has remained most clearly fixed in my mind, after long journeys through the most varied countries, is that each people possesses a mental constitution as unaltering as its anatomical characteristics, a constitution which is the source of its sentiments, thoughts, institutions, beliefs, and arts. Tocqueville and other illustrious thinkers have imagined that they have discovered in the institutions of the various peoples the cause of their evolution. I, on the contrary, am persuaded and hope to prove, while choosing my examples from the countries studied by Tocqueville, that institutions are of extremely slight importance as regards the evolution of civilization. They are most often effects, and but very rarely causes. The history of peoples is determined, no doubt, by very different factors. It is full of particular cases, of accidents which have taken place but which might not have taken place. Side by side, however, with these chances, with these accidental circumstances, there are great permanent laws which govern the general course of each civilization. The mental constitution of races proceeds from the most general, the most primordial of these permanent laws. The life of a people, its institutions, beliefs, and arts are but the visible expression of its invisible soul. For a people to transform its institutions, beliefs, and arts, it must first transform its soul. To enable it to bequeath its civilization to another people, it would be necessary that it should be able to bequeath its soul. Doubtless this is not what history teaches, But we shall easily show that in recording contrary assertions it has allowed itself to be misled by vain appearances. The reformers who have followed one another for a century past have endeavoured to change everything, gods, the earth, and men, but their efforts have been wholly unavailing, so far as regards the century-old characteristics of the souls of races which time has established. The conception of the irreducible differences which separate human beings is entirely contrary to the ideas of modern socialists, but it is not the teachings of science that could induce the apostles of a new dogma to renounce their illusory doctrines. Their efforts are a new phase of the eternal crusade of humanity in quest of happiness, that treasure of Hesperides for which the peoples have been searching from the dawn of history onwards. The dream of equality would perhaps avail as much as the old illusions which cradled us in the past, were it not that it is destined to be shattered at an early date on the immovable rock of natural inequalities. Together with old age and death, these inequalities are a part of those apparent iniquities of which nature is full and to which man must submit. End of introduction.